Once upon a time, there was a powerful king named Shahryar. He ruled over a vast kingdom but became bitter after discovering his wife's betrayal. In his anger, he decided to marry a new woman every night, and the next morning, he would have her killed. The people of his kingdom were terrified. But then, one brave woman named Scheherazade volunteered to marry the king. She had a plan to stop the cruel cycle and save many lives. On the first night of their marriage, Scheherazade started telling the king a story. She told him about a magical kingdom and a brave prince. But just before the story reached its climax, the sun began to rise. She stopped and said, "I will finish the story tomorrow night." The king, curious to know what would happen next, agreed to spare her life for one more day. Scheherazade's plan had worked. She knew the king loved stories, and she would use them to keep herself alive. The next night, Scheherazade continued the story. The prince found a secret door in the palace, leading to hidden treasure. But before she could reveal what happened next, she stopped again as dawn approached. The king was even more curious now. He decided once more to keep Scheherazade alive so he could hear the end of the story. Each night, Scheherazade told a new part of the story, and each morning, the king spared her life to hear more. As the nights passed, Scheherazade told many stories. She spoke of magic carpets that flew across the sky, of brave sailors who fought sea monsters, and of wise men who outsmarted evil villains. The king was completely fascinated by her stories. But he didn't realize that Scheherazade was also teaching him important lessons through her tales. She spoke about kindness, justice, and mercy. Slowly, the king's heart began to soften. One of the stories that grabbed the king's attention was about a poor fisherman. The fisherman found a bottle in the sea. When he opened it, a huge genie appeared. The genie was angry because he had been trapped for many years. He wanted to harm the fisherman. But the fisherman used his cleverness and tricked the genie back into the bottle. The king admired the fisherman's intelligence and started to see that sometimes cleverness was more important than strength. Night after night, Scheherazade continued to tell new stories. One night, she told the king about a wise merchant. The merchant was wronged by his friends, but instead of seeking revenge, he chose to forgive them. His act of kindness changed their hearts, and they became loyal to him. This story made the king think about his own life. He had been seeking revenge on all women because of one betrayal. But now he wondered if there was another way to live. Scheherazade knew that her plan was working. The king, who had once been cold and cruel, was now listening with interest and care. She could see the change in his eyes. He no longer talked about killing her in the morning. Instead, he was eager to know what would happen next in her stories. Scheherazade felt hope for the first time. She knew that if she could keep telling stories, she might not only save her own life but also change the king forever. As the stories continued, Scheherazade introduced more thrilling adventures. She told the king about a brave sailor named Sinbad, who traveled across dangerous seas and faced many challenges. Sinbad fought giant birds, escaped deadly storms, and discovered mysterious islands. The king was on the edge of his seat every night, eager to hear how Sinbad would survive. The suspense of each story kept the king interested, and Scheherazade was safe for another day. But Scheherazade didn't just tell tales of adventure. She also shared stories of wisdom and love. One night, she told a story about a young princess who was kind and gentle. Even though she faced many hardships, she never lost her kindness. In the end, her goodness was rewarded, and she became a beloved queen. This story touched the king's heart deeply. He began to question his own actions and wondered if there was still room for kindness in his life. The king started to spend more time thinking about the lessons in Scheherazade's stories. He realized that he had been living with anger and mistrust for too long. Her stories showed him that the world was full of both good and bad, but it was his choice to see which side he wanted to live on. Night after night, the king looked forward to hearing more stories, and each one brought him closer to a new way of thinking. Scheherazada's clever plan was working. One night, Scheherazade told a story that shocked the king. It was about a king who was betrayed by his closest advisor. In his anger, the king ordered the advisor's execution. But later, he discovered that the advisor had been framed. Full of regret, the king spent the rest of his life trying to make up for his mistake. This story made Shahryar think about his own actions. He had killed many innocent women because of one betrayal. Could he live with the guilt? As Scheherazade reached the 1000th night, the king realized something important. He no longer wanted to kill her. In fact, he could not imagine life without her stories and wisdom. She had opened his heart and mind in ways he never thought possible. The once cold king had been transformed. He began to see the world with new eyes. He realized that Scheherazade had not only saved her life but had saved him as well. The next morning, for the first time in a long while, the king did not order Scheherazade's execution. Instead, he told her that he loved her and wanted to keep her as his queen. The news spread throughout the kingdom, and the people celebrated. They were overjoyed that the cruel cycle had finally ended. Scheherazade's bravery and intelligence had saved not just her own life but also the lives of countless others. The kingdom was finally at peace. Scheherazade continued to be a beloved queen. She shared her wisdom with the king, helping him rule with justice and mercy. Her stories were no longer just for survival, they became a way to guide the kingdom towards a brighter future. The people admired her for her cleverness and courage, and they looked to her for advice. Even after the 1001 nights had passed, Scheherazade's tales lived on, reminding everyone of the power of storytelling. Years passed, and the kingdom flourished under the rule of Shahryar and Scheherazade. The king, once known for his cruelty, was now known for his fairness. He listened to his people and ruled with kindness. Scheherazade's influence had completely transformed him. The people of the kingdom told stories of their brave queen, who had risked everything to save them. Her legend grew, and her name became a symbol of hope and wisdom. One day, a young boy asked Scheherazade how she had come up with so many stories. She smiled and told him, "The world is full of stories. You just have to look around and listen." The boy was amazed. He wanted to be a storyteller too, just like the queen. Scheherazade encouraged him, telling him that stories could change the world. She believed in the power of imagination and wanted to inspire future generations to dream big and think wisely. Scheherazade's tales were passed down from generation to generation. Her stories of love, adventure, and wisdom were told in every corner of the kingdom. People learned valuable lessons from them, just as the king had. They understood the importance of forgiveness, kindness, and courage. Scheherazade had not only changed a king but had also transformed an entire kingdom. Her legacy continued to inspire storytellers for many years to come. The story of Scheherazade and the 1001 Nights became one of the most famous tales in history. People from distant lands came to hear the stories, and soon they were told in different languages. The magic of her storytelling spread far and wide. It was said that whoever heard her tales would be wiser and kinder. Scheherazade had proven that stories had the power to heal, to teach, and to transform even the coldest of hearts. And so, Scheherazade's legacy lived on. Her bravery and intelligence showed that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. Through her stories, she had not only saved her own life but had changed the life of a king and the fate of a kingdom. The power of storytelling became a timeless lesson, reminding everyone that words could shape the world. And as long as stories were told, Scheherazade would never be forgotten.